bill from Kenny MacAskill.
Mr Speaker, I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to abolish higher standing charges for customers with prepayment meters, to require energy companies to provide social tariffs for low-income customers and for connected purposes. Energy costs are the social and economic issue of our time, yet the steps taken to mitigate the pain of rises is far from adequate. Fuel poverty is soaring and winter is nearing. That Scotland, which is energy rich, should find over half its people fuel poor is absurd, and the pain is likewise felt south of the border, even if the climate is less severe and the natural bounty less kind. Additional action is therefore required across the country and urgently, especially for those most desperate and most vulnerable. The additional $2,500 isn't a cap, but the average cost. Past support has provided modest finance, but which has been inadequate for most to keep pace with soaring costs. Fear is turning to horror as bills escalate in the knowledge that even this support is only there until April. Beyond the government's soundbites, hardship remains, and the cost of energy will bite many severely, if not devour them. Anomalies and injustices remain which must cease. The most appalling is the perversity of prepayment meters having higher standing charges. A social tariff for those poorest and most vulnerable, as exists in many other countries, must also be introduced. That is what lies at the heart of this bill. It's supported by Energy Action Scotland and National Energy Action, who know the fuel poverty faced by those whose interests they represent, as well as by Age Scotland, who advocate on behalf of older people. I'm grateful for their endorsement. Scotland is disproportionately affected, with some 500,000 prepayment meters, but across Britain it's still significant, with 4 million households having higher costs imposed by PPMs. Action to address these injustices is both right and necessary, as fuel and energy costs are not luxuries but necessities. Their implications in our modern society go far beyond heating your home. Power and energy are required for so many basic aspects of our life. The inability to provide them undermines the ability to function in our society or to maintain dignity and self-respect. Of course, a new euphemism has entered our lexicon. That's a phrase of self-disconnection. It's misleading. It's insidious. It's akin to those other phrases that are meant to hide horror or injustice, such as collateral damage, when what's meant is the killing of innocent civilians. What does self-disconnection mean in reality? It isn't someone who simply chooses not to switch on the heating, nor is it referring to the past generation, although no doubt fast returning parental demands to switch off lights or turn off the shower. Instead, it's a situation which many now find themselves in, where they simply cannot afford to switch on, either through buying a power card or simply turning on the heating or any other powered appliance. It's not voluntary. It may not be imposed through any law or enforced at the barrel of a gun, but it's forced upon them through circumstances over which they have no control. And it's why this bill and the actions it requires is necessary. For disconnection, or more likely self-disconnection, has widespread implications which are horrific, yet masked by benign euphemisms. It's not simply the horror of choosing between heating and eating this winter. That alone is bad enough. But the implications of being unable to access power go far beyond that. It's the mother who wishes to wash her children's clothes for school so she can keep them clean and smart. It's the youngster that needs to charge their phone to access employment opportunities that they desperately seek. It's the parent who wants to power up the iPad given by the school so that their child can improve their education and hence their life chances. It's the dialysis patient who requires to switch on the machine they require for life itself, never mind others suffering from cancer or sick from other illnesses and who feel the cold more, yet are unable to provide or even denied that modest comfort during convalescence, or even shamefully at end of life. Compounding that injustice are accrued standing charges, even when users have been sparing in their consumption. Many will find that their power card or savings are immediately consumed by paying debt before they even get a modicum of power. As I said, fuel and energy costs are about more than just heating or eating. They're about dignity, they're about opportunity, they're about life itself. This has not come about through some climatic disaster, as has tragically afflicted Pakistan, nor can it be blamed solely on Putin and the war in Ukraine. These are policy issues overseen by the UK government and where injustice and iniquity has been allowed to take root. Much of that can be addressed by the ending of higher standing charges for prepayment meters and through the implementation of a social tariff for those with least and most vulnerable. After all, it is not just unjust but perverse that those with least should pay most for energy, especially when those with most are paying least in their tax burden. I accept that some have found prepayment meters helpful for budgeting, although the strength of that argument has been sapped, if not ended, by the arrival of smart meters. There's also the situation of private landlords who wish to ensure that they avoid costs if a tenant should depart without paying their bill. Again, smart meters offer some solution, but again the issue isn't the meter itself, but the tariff charged. 13% of smart meters are on prepayment tariffs. Mr. Speaker, technology is meant to liberate us, not perpetuate injustice. Prepayment meters, whether smart or otherwise, can remain, but what must end are the higher standing charges and tariffs. They are simply unacceptable any time, but most especially now. Both Ofgem and energy suppliers testify to the technical capacity to make that change. What is required is the political will, which is why I proposed this bill, and it has widespread support within and without Parliament. It would, of course, require a very modest tariff increase for those paying on credit, but the numbers involved and the amount of energy consumed through PPMs make it a very small burden upon those of us more fortunate. Likewise, a social tariff is a concept whose time has come. Ending the burden on those poorest and most vulnerable through changes to PPM tariffs must be matched by the availability of a social tariff, one where those poorest and most vulnerable can access energy and at affordable rates. It is a concept that has the support of those organisations I mentioned earlier with regard to action on prepayment meters, Energy Action Scotland, Aid Scotland and National Energy Action. But it's also a concept argued for by the Fuel Bank Foundation and by Fair by Design. Again, organisations working at the heart of those whom the fuel and energy crisis is hitting hardest. It's not impossible, let alone unheard of. Even before the current energy crisis and emergency measures being invoked, other countries provided for the poorest and most vulnerable. A federal law in Belgium protected residential consumers with low income or precarious situation. That social tariff saw almost 10% of electricity users pay 34% less, and a similar figure of users for gas pay between 38 and 48% less. Those were the poorest and most vulnerable, and certainly those facing the most acute need and difficulties. There, the social tariff covers people receiving minimum income benefits, people receiving an income replacement benefit, people with disabilities receiving integrated support, and people in receipt of an income guarantee benefit. Who would quibble with those priorities or dispute that those people have additional need for fuel and energy, which requires that they be charged on a tariff that recognises that? Belgium isn't alone in operating a social tariff. Again, even before this crisis, Spain provided a social bonus scheme whereby a 25% discount was available on electricity bills for vulnerable energy customers, including disabled customers, with a 40% discount for severely disabled customers. Other countries also take the appropriate action, even if criteria, eligibility and amount may vary. But the urgent need remains that in this time of crisis, those poorest and most vulnerable require most support and should pay the lowest tariffs. That and the injustice of higher charges being imposed them must end. It's why this bill is necessary. Energy, fuel and power are fundamental.
Order. I'm just saying, it is a 10-minute rule, Bill. You've gone beyond the 10 minutes. I hope you can quickly sum up. Can you, MacAskill?
Indeed. I simply say, Mr Speaker, that Scotland is energy rich, that Scots are fuel poor. It's absurd that it should be replicated across the UK as shameful. Worse than that is the perversity that those poorest and most vulnerable pay most. That must end, and this bill will ensure that. I beg leave to move.
Right. That the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. The question... One of us is going to have to sit down. Might be better if I stand for this bit. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many of that opinion say aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare to bring in the bill?
Neil Hanvey, Richard Burgon, Angus Brendan McNeill, Alistair Carmichael, Liz Saville-Roberts, Margaret Ferrier, Alison Thewlis and myself.
Kenny MacAskill.
Thank you. Energy costs, prepayment meters and social tariffs bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday, 24th March 2023.
Friday the 24th of March